Sorry, I'm having issues unmuting the bridge. 1 second. Okay, you are now live.
Good morning. I'm Vice Mayor Shanika Smith and the Chair of the Public Safety Committee. I would like to welcome you to our February 23rd meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on the Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by dialing 855-925-2801 and entering the code 9477. For those of you who are out there with us today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 9477. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, the callers will hear for more options. Please press star. Pressing star 3 will allow callers to continue to listen live and join the speaker queue. As stated on the agenda, public comment will now be heard at the beginning of the end of the meeting. Callers will comment only once during the general public comment section, either during the beginning or the end, either during the beginning or the end of public comment period, but not both. We'll be taking public comment after the staff and council introductions. So if you would like to make a comment, please join the speaker queue by pressing star 3. If you're watching the meeting through the live stream while you're listening to the meeting by phone, please be sure to turn down the volume on your device before speaking. Now I'll go through and introduce all the committee members and staff who are virtual. Councilwoman Sandra Kilgore.
Hello.
Councilwoman Kim Roney.
Good morning.
City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
City Attorney Brad Branham.
Hello, everyone.
Fire Chief Scott Burnett.
Good morning.
Police Chief David Zach.
Good morning.
All right. Now, as I mentioned, we will start with public comment. Staff, is there anyone in a speaker queue?
There's no one in the speaker queue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
And I'll second.
Okay, now do a roll call vote to approve the motion. Councilwoman Kilgore.
Yes, yay.
Councilwoman Roney.
Aye.
And myself, aye. The minutes have been approved. We will now hear from the fire department's activity report from Fire Chief Scott Burnett.
Good morning. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share with the committee some activity from the fire department last calendar year. So we have 2 layers that the fire department has related to emergencies within our community. And we often think about the second layer, which is our fire stations, our fire trucks, and emergency response when someone calls 911. This quote, many have heard, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, from Benjamin Franklin back in the 1700s. He wrote that related to fire prevention. It's certainly relevant today with the pandemic that we are in, but that is the approach that the Asheville Fire Department takes to responding to emergencies. Outcomes are so much better if an emergency never happens than trying to respond to that emergency and repairing damage that has been done. And so our firefighters do an amazing job at minimizing suffering and loss when someone calls 911. But our goal is to prevent someone from having to call 911, because that is the best possible outcome, is for the emergency not to occur. So with that in mind, I wanted to share some of the activity that we have had in the last 12 months related to our community risk reduction approach. Jenny, if you could go to the next slide, please. So to find out how to prevent fires, we first must know what is causing fires in our community. And as you can see, over the last 4 years, the number of fires that we investigate have been steadily increasing. And also the number of fires that we have determined to be intentionally set, incendiary fires, also is trending upward. So what do we do with that? If we can look at the next slide. So since our workload is increasing, and we've also learned that equipment malfunctions cause most of our fires here in Asheville, and the fires that we have in our homes, cooking fires, are most common. And also, since our intentionally set fires are increasing, what we have done is we've restructured our fire marshal division to be able to increase our fire investigation resources. We merged our education and investigation functions. So that same group of employees who are identifying what is causing our fires are also the ones that can go out and are educating our community on how to prevent those same fires. We've also had a significantly increased coordination with Asheville Police Department. So we meet every single month with our fire investigation, fire education folks, with the police department's folks who are in investigations. And that coordination is at the highest level that we've ever had in my tenure as fire chief. An example of the benefits of that increased coordination, the fire that we had last year on Hilliard, the apartments that were under construction, from that, we have a plan with the police department and the fire department to go to construction sites and educate contractors on how to keep their sites safe from intentionally set fires, so to try to prevent that from occurring again. Another thing that we were able to do successfully is we were able to receive a $42,000 FEMA grant for fire investigation equipment, which will help significantly us to not only determine what is causing our fires, but also using that equipment as an education piece to educate our community on how to prevent those fires. Next slide, please. So that education, clearly the pandemic has created significant challenges for us to educate our community. Our in-person training has decreased, obviously, through this pandemic. So we've shifted gears, as have so many of our functions in our world in 2021. We've shifted gears to do as much outreach as we can virtually, so that we can do it safely during this pandemic. And so over 100,000 folks, not only folks that are living in our community, but folks that are visiting our community, we've been able to reach. And we have restaurants, homes, businesses. We've created materials that we can share with our restaurants on how they can prevent fires, keep their restaurants safe, as well as homes and business as well. We're utilizing the Neighbors app, which is a free app that allows us to increase our reach to our community by being able to push out in every avenue that we know how, virtually, on different items of interest and in our community as it relates to fire education, fire safety, health and wellness. We also are one of only 250 communities in the whole nation that were selected to be a pilot of the National Fire Protection Association's Community Risk Assessment, which is really a powerful nationwide tool that will allow us to drill down into where the risk is in our community for medical emergencies, for hazardous materials incidents, for fire emergencies and such. Next slide, please. So our inspections and permitting is one way that we significantly decrease our fire problem. And again, just like our education, the pandemic has been a significant challenge with our inspections. And so our periodic inspections, we have performed less of those, obviously, during the pandemic than we would in a normal year. But we still have done over 1,000 periodic inspections of our business and commercial properties. The new construction permits, almost 3,000, 930 plan reviews of new projects. And what that allows when we are still able to do those inspections, we had 183 fires in properties that were not inspected and only 19 fires in inspected buildings. And so certainly our history shows us that as we inspect properties and buildings, the chance of them having a fire goes down significantly. Another exciting improvement that will help us, especially as this pandemic continues, is the utilization of Streamline, which is a software-based application for our inspections. And so rather than an in-person visit where we are doing our inspection on paper, the fire inspector can enter all of that information on a tablet, and it just limits the amount of interaction with the employees in the building. But more importantly, it allows us to have a database of where the risk is in our community in the built environment. Next slide, please. Another exciting opportunity that we have with a free app that folks can have on their phones is a thing called PulsePoint, and there is no cost for this. And we're going to be pushing out communications soon to our community about this. But what PulsePoint does is when somebody calls 911 and someone's having a heart attack or their heart has stopped, if that's the report from 911, then a notification goes out to anyone who has this PulsePoint on their phone, and that shows a couple of things. One, it shows that there's somebody that needs help in that area. And so if they're close by, they'll know that 1 block, 2 blocks away, when their neighbors needs help. Also, it shows where the AEDs, the automated external defibrillators, are located that are publicly accessible. And so in this example, we put a mark here at the fire station. And so if someone were to call 911 and report that someone was having a heart attack here at the fire station, then anyone who had this free app on their phone would be notified. And it also shows the locations. And so there's two publicly accessible defibrillators in City Hall. And so it shows a picture of where that is located too, 2nd floor by the rear elevator. So what we know is that our overall survival rates for cardiac arrest in our entire county is 9% last year. When those cardiac arrests were unwitnessed, the chance of survival goes way down. But when they were witnessed, when someone was there to start CPR and render help for that person, it goes up to 16%. If the person actually does CPR, then it goes up to almost a third. And that's real data from here locally. And so we're excited about this opportunity to be able to alert those that we have trained in CPR, who has CPR training on their own, that there's somebody that needs their help here in our community close by that they can help and respond to. Next slide, please. So our focus, the remainder of this third quarter and the fourth quarter for the remainder of this fiscal year within the fire department is implementing our equity and inclusion strategies. So this summer, all of our chief officers participated in some training and several workshops on what can we do to move forward equity and inclusion with the Asheville Fire Department. And from there, we identified 4 focus areas that we wanted to improve in. And one's recruitment, selection, retention, culture, contracting and purchasing, and the 4th, community engagement. We assembled an equity and inclusion implementation team. Paulina Menendez has helped us with that. She's helping leading that team. And we've got a team, which I'm a very active part of, to move forward our strategies within those 4 different focus areas. Also, our budget development for fiscal 22, compensation and benefits obviously is a big focus, not only within our department, but our city as a whole, and our facilities. That's a big challenge that we continue to move forward with our aging fire stations. The pandemic response will continue. Your fire department is a big focus with the pandemic response. The Emergency Operations Center countywide, the county has asked one of our employees to be the manager, and he continues to be the Emergency Operations Center manager for the pandemic response. And then also we have about 10 folks every day that are working at the mass vaccination sites that the county is doing. And then also they've asked our folks to be the site manager for those. And so we have a big role in the pandemic response in that manner. And so that sums up the activity report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. This is Kim. I do have a couple questions. For clarification, this new PulsePoint app is just alerting for heart attacks at this point?
That's correct. And so and when somebody, and it's really just based on how that is reported. So if somebody reports and says, I think somebody's having a heart attack, or someone is in cardiac arrest, then that's when that will be pushed out, tied to our CAT, and alerted to those folks.
And also that anyone in the public is able to download that app and therefore have that public information?
That is correct. And so when we have that live, we will certainly work with our folks within community and public engagement to push that out as widely and broadly, and would love council's assistance as well, pushing that out to all of y'all's connections so that we can get as many people as possible.
Question.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to ask, is it a requirement for all the firemen to actually have this access to this app, or is it required for them to have it?
So we are notified through our CAD system, and we're actually dispatched. And so we already have that notifications. And yes, everything that is, when everyone in the department is alerted when that occurs. Okay. And somebody has any kind of a medical emergency. So this would just be for the communities, for the public.
Chief Burnett, the acronym you said CAD, can you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Computer aided dispatch. Apologize for that. Thank you for. That's our computer system at the public safety answering point, where when someone calls 911 and that information is entered into that computer, it notifies and dispatches the closest resources.
And then I had one other question, and I'm open to hearing what you think is the best analysis for this, but instead of seeing percentage points, I was thinking it could be helpful for the community to see real numbers, whether it's a bar graph, so that we could turn a number into a neighbor, not with their name, obviously, but with just seeing numbers, how successful this is, and not just as a percentage, but 9 people were helped this way. And then we did some outreach and some more trust building and community information. And then 12 people were helped in this way. It might help to personalize it, but that may not be the best answer at this time. It just came to mind.
Yeah, no, I think that's great feedback, and that's very simple to do.
And I think we should also possibly do a map to see where we have some concentrations, so that as we work in collaboration with Mission and MAHAC and others, we can direct education or some types of effort actually linked to our reimagining public safety, thinking of public safety in a broader context. So thank you, Kim. I think we should have numbers and try to geographically locate that information.
I also had a question about, just to make sure I fully understand, because I've participated in some of these inspections. And the awesome staff is very thorough and helpful and informative. So what I'm understanding is that we're moving from a paper process to a digital process. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
And so then we'll have more data sets that we can pull from quickly instead of having to review paper forms.
That is correct. Yes, and so it'll Streamline is the name of the software, and it does exactly that. It will allow our inspectors to be more efficient, allow them to spend more time educating rather than processing paperwork.
Thank you so much.
Are there any more questions from the committee?
One other question I'd like to ask. I know you were talking about the inclusionary part of the program, and you were saying community engagement. Is it possible you could give me an idea of what that community engagement looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. And so the fire department, we have historically been a service that if you need our assistance, call us and we'll come and we'll be there in 5 minutes. That's kind of been our approach and approach of all fire departments. We want to flip that completely, and we want to be engaged with all of our communities within our city. And so what that looks like is following the work that our police department has done with the community resource officers and attending meetings, attending gatherings, and clearly, we'll be able to ramp that up significantly as we get past this pandemic. But being engaged and being a part of our community on the front end, and so those relationships exist, are established, and so that our community knows our firefighters, not when they call 911, and not everyone in all of our communities are even comfortable calling 911. And so being engaged in our community so that those relationships happen so that we can provide that service in that manner rather than having that reactive strategy that we've traditionally had. And so to summarize what that looks like is just being a more part of our community in every aspect. Every time there's a gathering, every time there is a meeting, anything where our community is coming together, we want to be part of that so that we can be engaged with our community and hear from our community, how can we serve you better?
Okay, well, the one thing I was concerned about, I noticed that in a lot of cities, they have such programs as, say, for instance, you may have some type of recreational activity where people are more relaxed in that type of environment. And say, for instance, you had something like a little basketball league for the fire department, basketball league for the police department, and a basketball league for the community to put together. And we have sort of some type of little sport activity going to in the community. I think, is anything like that on the agenda? I think what we have to do is sort of open up those lines where people feel comfortable in those type of environments. I think it'll actually help with the relationship all together. And I just wondered if anything like that is on the agenda.
Yes, ma'am. It absolutely is, and it is occurring, and will continue. The pandemic clearly has slowed that down. But pre-pandemic, our firefighters were working with our Parks and Recreation department, and we had firefighters out there with our youth playing flag football, coaching soccer, flag football, basketball. And so that, you're exactly right. That has been very successful for us, and we want to ramp that up significantly once it's safe to do that and those programs return so that we are in that relaxed atmosphere and it becomes a much more a relational type interaction rather than a presentation or question and answer session. So yeah, you're exactly right. Those are the types of strategies that we want to continue and ramp up significantly.
Thank you, Chief Burnett. Police Chief Zach will now give us a police department's activity report.
Good morning again, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to once again address you all, give you kind of a idea what's happening internally in the police department, but also how we're working within the community and also give you a bit of a snapshot on crime as it pertains to the city. So if we can move forward. As you know, we've started our community engagement division in November of 2020. We currently have 15 officers assigned to that division. Since its inception, the division has handled 87 complaints that are, mostly your quality of life neighborhood issues. We've been able to close out 21 of those complaints. 66 are still pending, and we're working towards solutions on those problems. But also a big part of the division's responsibility is to participate in community meetings and just hear not only what's happening within neighborhoods, but also what concerns people citywide. We've been able to attend 6 meetings so far. And clearly what you can see here is what's on the mind of our residents, and homeless camps certainly are something that we're asked about frequently. You can see 47% of the people we talk to, that's their primary concern. So again, we're just out there listening and trying to get a better understanding of what concerns people most. Next, please. When we do talk about the camps and the ones that we're addressing and working with our partnerships on, you can see kind of the breakdown here. When we get called, 33% of the time it's for a concern on private property, 8% on DOT property, and really only 6% on city-owned property. Those are the concerns that we're addressing and where the complaints are generated from. Next. Big topic, as we all know, is the attrition rate that we're currently contending with here at APD. Our sworn in January of 2020 was 238 officers. That's what we were budgeted for. And since January 20, we have lost 69 of those officers. So that's a significant number. When you take into account the other various leaves, whether it's military leave, sick leave, reassigned for administrative purposes, light duty assignments, on any given day, we are down 31 to 35% of our sworn staff. So again, just a significant number of attrition, and managing our staffing is really a day-to-day concern as the number continues to fluctuate. Next, please. Currently, we do have 8 replacements in the pipeline who are at their basic law enforcement training right now. We did have 164 total applications that we were receiving the last couple months. When we posted for invites to come back to do the written test and the full application process, only 24 people actually came back. When we start looking at, then who's a viable candidate after that, whether it was, they weren't able to pass the physical assessment or trouble with the written test, or there were problems during the panel interviews that were unearthed, only 7 applicants were even qualified to move forward. And what I can tell you with that is historically, when you look at that, that 7 just get to the next phase of the background investigation and the next phase of testing, that usually you'll lose 3 or 4 of those. So as far as replacements for our next class in July, best case scenario is 7, but in all likelihood, it's going to be, perhaps only half of that. So not a lot in the pipeline right now, but of course we're working on that. Next, please. What I'd like to just kind of cover real quick, something that's really, the staffing crisis has really created, is an increase in our response times for virtually all calls. But of course, I think what everybody's concerned most about is our priority calls and our priority one calls. These are the most serious calls that we go on. So you can kind of see a list, a partial list. The lists are more expanded, but there's only so much that we can fit in. But you can see the priority calls, that's a major emergency where response is key, and priority one is very close to that as well. Next, please. So what you see, and we're using May of 2020 as our guideline, because that's when we were still fully staffed. As we know, we've seen the most loss of people in June is when our attrition rate really started to ramp up. So if you use that May as your baseline, you can see over the last several months from November, December, and January, response time is continually creeping up. So for our highest priority calls, it's taking us 27% longer. What that means is roughly 2 minutes longer for us to get there on our highest priority calls. When someone's in danger, when someone is in need of immediate police service, it's taking us 2 minutes longer to get there now. And when you're in trouble and when your life's in jeopardy, that's a lot. 2 minutes seems like a lifetime. So that's very serious. But it's 27% longer, but the calls for service are down 25%. We know these numbers as you hit May, June, July, calls for service are going to be much higher. They're going to be at that May level. So we're anticipating these call times and these response times on high priority calls to get much, much higher. The traffic will be greater. There'll be more tourists in town. We know we're going to see a probably return to commerce and, more business being open. So again, just the traffic and the call volume is going to go up significantly, but we're already seeing lengthened times to respond with calls being down. So we're very, very concerned about this. Our low priority calls, you can see the time for us to respond has gone up dramatically. These are your basic report calls or maybe just, a parking complaint, so on and so forth. It is just taking us far longer to get there. And again, call volume down 45%. When the call volume goes up to normal summertime levels, that wait time is going to increase drastically. There's just no way around that. Next, please. What we're trying to do, what I can tell you is we're doing as much as possible. This is a day-to-day issue for us here, where we're having to make adjustments constantly. What we've done so far is we've had to reassign some detectives to patrol work. Of course, now that means we're triaging cases that we can investigate. Those investigations are going to take longer. If we're able to assign cases at all to certain crimes, we're triaging that. We've had to reduce our number of school resource officers from 5 to 3. We are currently, I met with the school district last week, and we've even informed them that we cannot promise that we'll always have 3 available, depending on how attrition either stems or continues. We are now assigning just designated report cars. That's all they do. And we're leaving our other officers and our other cars available just for those higher priority calls. So that's kind of creating the wait time on the report calls, because we have to have those officers available to respond to an emergency if necessary. We've cut back on our patrol districts because we've had to spread our resources thinner. So we've taken it down from 4 districts to 3. We've had to eliminate all of our bike and foot patrols citywide. We just do no longer have that luxury to have officers on bikes or on foot. Next, please. One of the things we have done just to kind of speed up report times is we're trying to encourage people, if possible, especially in South Asheville, we've opened up in-person reporting. We're using non-sworn personnel so people can just come up and file a complaint down to in our South District. They don't have to come all the way downtown. We're continuing to promote our police to citizen online reporting. And that's where we really need help from our city residents to really utilize that tool and go with online reporting for minor, again, your report calls, things of that nature, to use that tool as much as possible, because it just keeps our officers freed up for the more vital tasks. So we've had some success, but we could certainly use a lot more relief there. But we continue to promote that tool. But, you know, as we find just sometimes and more often than not, even if it's what might be of minor nature to us, people still want to see that police officer. They still want to talk to the officer. And of course, the online tool is rather impersonal because they still need advice. They still need direction. With our specialized units, we have kind of reassigned certain patrol tasks to those specialized units. So we're using them in a different manner. We're looking at our deployment every single day. We're looking for hotspots. We're looking for areas that seem to be most affected by crime. And we're just shifting resources, sometimes hour by hour, day by day, week by week. We're moving, you know, where we can best predict that criminal activity is occurring and where we can at least have that physical presence. So this changes, you know, what we might do on Monday is different than we might do on Friday. What we do at 2 a.m. in a certain part of the city might be different than what we do at 2 o'clock in the morning in a different part of the city. So we really have to crunch the data almost daily to just have our just best guess of where our officers may be needed most. And again, we will just, you know, as far as attrition goes, we don't know where we're going to be another month or two from now. So we just will continue to triage as best we can, with, of course, the priority being those priority and priority 1 calls. So we are in a little bit of a mode where we really have to triage and make sure that we're getting to those emergency calls first. Next, please. As far as, you know, where we're at with crime, especially violent crime, really we're holding steady right where we were at in 2020. 2021 is continuing down that path. So you can see with our aggravated assaults, homicides, fortunately, we haven't had any rape, armed robbery, common law robbery. We're right at the totals we were at this time last year. So violent crime, especially on those most violent offenses, really hasn't been affected or hasn't changed much. It's on the rise, but we're steady right now with where we were at in 2020. Next, please. As far as gun discharges, again, you know we had well over 600 gun discharge calls in the city last year, so we monitor that as well. And you can see through the first 2 months of the year, we're still seeing that high amount of gun discharge calls. And of course, the victims of shootings as well, we are very close to our numbers from a year ago. So this is something that is of great concern to the police department, of course, our community, is that we have to work harder to stem gun violence. Next, please. I was asked a little bit about this recently, and just an update on where we were at for written consent to search on motor vehicles. This policy was implemented back in October of 2019. And we're talking about in 2020, with well over 5,300 stops, only 21 times did we request a written consent for search. So it's not something that happens very often. It does happen, but again, those searches, not only are they documented by the officer's body-worn camera, but also by the written consent. So it doesn't happen often, but it does happen. Year to date, just in the first 2 months, we've only done 3. So again, just not a very often occurrence, but it does happen. Next, please. Just moving forward, what we're going to just continue to pound away at is we've got to continue to try and develop a gun violence reduction strategy. You've heard me talk about that a little bit. So hopefully in 2021, we can really have that long-term strategy in place and get past the talking stage and get into the actual implementation of that strategy. Staffing, again, this is a day-to-day thing that we have to look at, and we just have to keep coming up with contingency plans for that, especially as call volume increases as we get closer to the spring and summer months. We know the traffic's going to increase. We know that most likely crime will increase, and also our overall calls for service. So we have to plan for that constantly. One thing that we have rolled out recently is this VISLAR training. It's a non-escalation, de-escalation, and crisis management communication course. I was very familiar with this course from my time in New York, and it was very effective, not only with how an officer engages with a community member, particularly on traffic stops, but also that it's been very effective in reducing use of force and really those contentious encounters by giving our officers some better communication skills and strategies, especially when dealing with someone who might be non-compliant. So we've got our trainers in place. We had who we contracted with. They were in here last month. We trained, I believe, like 10 officers to train the entire department. This training will now roll out in March of this year, and it will be mandatory for all of our sworn officers. And that's what I have. So I'll take your questions.
I have a few questions. Can we go back to slide 10, please? This is Kim. Is it possible to pull up the presentation again? We did just get these slides at 9:33 this morning, right? Less than an hour and a half before the meeting. So I hope you'll be gracious with me as I kind of just look at this as a quick response. So this slide tells me two things just on preliminary analysis. One, I'm concerned that we might be overstating the harm when we have less homicide and rape on this chart. So it's not just the same. Now, I am not discounting the harm that's done with aggravated assault or armed robbery, but at the same time, we're in a pandemic and so many of our residents and folks are in an economic crisis. So at the same time, I want to acknowledge that not all of our neighbors may feel safe calling 911 or APD to address harm proactively. So I don't think we're able to really see enough with just these numbers, but I wanted to make sure that we weren't overstating the harm. I also, just to my colleagues here on this committee, I wanted to remind us that on June 19th, if we can go to the slide about written consent to search. On June 19th of 2018, the then seated council passed 3 resolutions. 1, implementation of written consent policy for vehicular searches and searches of the person of personal property associated with the person. 2, implementation of policy that APD not base consent search on vehicular stops on a person having a criminal record or suspicious movement or behavior. And 3, implementation of policy to deprioritize low-level regulatory stops. So as we're looking and analyzing the outcomes of those resolutions, I think we should have an update at this committee level with a data analysis to this committee, and then we would need to recommend action to council. And we're only really going to be able to do that if we look and see how the policies resulted in outcomes in our community. Now, I know this is hard because so many things have changed. There were entire sections of the year where fewer people were driving, fewer visitors. I get that we are going to have to review this with just a careful analysis that this is different than other years. But until we really look at like where we are and keep an eye on where we're going, we won't have enough information just looking at one snapshot at a time. So this is both a request for data analysis that goes further than just the slides that we have here, and also a request for a future agenda item. I hope that we can consider that.
Any more questions or comments? If not, thank you, Chief Zach. And now we'll move on to public comment. Staff, do we have anyone in the speaker queue?
There's no one in the speaker queue.
Okay, to that, I'll stand adjourned. See you all later.